Hi, this is Mark Arnold with another episode of Fun Ideas Podcast. And today I have a cartoonist, an artist, an animator who did the cover of this book that I put behind me, created and produced by Total Television Productions. He also did the cover for my, which I don't have behind me, and my Think Pink book. Oh, there's the picture. Oops. There's the picture there. It disappeared. Anyway, so here he is, Mike Kazaleh. How are you today, sir?
Well, I'm fine, thank you.
All right. I've talked to you many times before, not on this format. And, there's actually people on Facebook, since you're not on Facebook, that says, why is Mike Kazaleh not on Facebook? And I kind of say, well, you have your private life and you want to do your own thing. But I mean, I guess the basic thing is, here's your opportunity. You can kind of address your fans because you're actually kind of known a little bit through your animation and through your commentaries and other things like that. So,
Oh, I don't know. I just never got on Facebook. It wasn't, I just never did it.
yeah, and there you have it, folks. So
I do Zooms though.
Yeah. So, I just wanted to put that out there because people say, well, why is, and some people think you do it because you don't do it because you're like resentful. And I go, no, he's a cool guy. He's
Resentful.
okay. Yeah. People make up things. So it's like, I go, no, here he is.
Yeah.
So, like I said, we've talked before, but, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you became an animator.
Well, I mean, they became an animator because I really wanted to do it very badly.
Mm-hmm.
So I started training myself to do it, and during my school years, which just meant trying to, draw pictures and filming them with whatever cameras I could borrow, and just trying to learn to do it. And I had a lucky break in Detroit doing commercials, and I did that for a while in sales films in Detroit, and then I went out to LA and I started working at Filmation, and that was the first time I worked somewhere where there were like really other cartoonists. Because before, when I was doing my stuff in Detroit, I was doing almost all of the work on them.
And what were you doing? Like just storyboarding or layouts or what type of
Oh
thing?
no, everything. Yeah. Storyboarding, layouts, animation, timing. I was inking the cells, painting the backgrounds.
Wow. You did do everything. Okay.
I had people paint, opaquing the cells, and I had a gentleman who used to help me with the photography and the editing.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it.
Now, what type of things did you do? Is it like commercials, or what did you produce in Detroit?
Yeah, they were commercials, a lot of them. Some of them were in-house videos for companies.
Mm-hmm. Would there be anything that we might have seen nationally, or is it all very localized?
It was, I mean, the longer films were, you wouldn't have seen nationally because they were from within a company. Like I made a few films for GMAC, but they were only shown to car dealers.
Oh, okay.
But
So
the commercials were mostly seen in the Midwest.
And what type of products were you typically promoting?
Well, I did 2 different home construction companies, Foot Doctor. Let me think. I did some little bits of animation for Owens Corning.
Okay. It wasn't Pink Panther, was it? Or was it?
The Pink Panther bit I did was for a trade show. It wasn't for one of the commercials.
Oh, okay. Okay.
No.
But were they affiliated with the Pink Panther at that time when you were working on
Oh
it?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. They were doing commercials with them selling fiberglass insulation. Yeah.
Okay. But you personally were working on a different product, or?
No, it was just I know I did some effects animation for a spot, but I did the Panther animation was literally for a tape they were running at a trade exhibition.
Wow. Okay. I never knew you did that. I mean, I
Yeah,
know obviously from me trying to show the book cover here. Let's try it again.
it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't much animation either.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll have to take this out. There it is. There we go. If I hold it like that, then you can see Panther at the animation board with the little white guy with a big nose coming in. Anyway.
yeah. You might notice that. I don't know if you can see it, but there's an action figure of the little frizz guy in the background right there.
Oh, okay, yeah. And then you got Big Boy next to him towering over him. That's funny. So, did you go directly from there to Filmation, or did you kind of shop around Hollywood or whatever? Try
No,
other places?
it's a long story, but I found out that Filmation was staffing up for a project, so I called them while I was still in Detroit. And I got Joe Mazuka, who was their production manager, on the phone. And he invited me to mail some drawings to them, and I did.
Mm-hmm.
He said, well, if you're in LA, stop by. I'll be happy to talk with you.
Mm-hmm.
I drove to LA. And
wow. So you didn't even fly.
The remarkable thing was I, got into a motel and called Joe Mazuka again. And he actually remembered he told me that. So he says, oh, yeah, hi, come on by.
Well, that's good. Yeah, usually people say, who are you again? Right?
Yeah. No, he actually meant it. So, and he got me, make a long story short, set up working there. So,
so he basically hired you on the spot then based on your drawings?
Well, no, he got me interviews with people at the company.
Mm-hmm. And so what projects did you work on at Filmation?
Well, I mean, yeah, they tried me out on He-Man and nobody liked that. And that's okay. I didn't really like He-Man myself. But they moved me over to Hal Sutherland's unit working on that Pinocchio movie.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which that was in 85. And they were going to make, I remember seeing a brochure they'd made for Westinghouse at the time. They were going to make 13 movies.
Yeah, I remember that.
They completed 2 of them.
Right. Wasn't it Happily Ever After was one, and then and then yours was Pinocchio and the Emperor of the Night. Is that the full title or something like that?
Yeah. The Pinocchio one was released in Europe first. Mm-hmm. The Happily Ever After one, I don't think came out till a couple of years after the studio was shut down.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it came out. I don't think they're trying to be chronological with Disney. I just think that the Pinocchio one was first and just got done first, correct?
Yeah. And that was actually probably the most expensive thing they ever made because it was fully animated all the way through. There wasn't any reuse in it. It was all full animation. Yeah.
I remember being pretty impressed with it considering at the time. I mean, now, you have computer animation and everything, but, compared to say like Journey Back to Oz, which is kind of like TV stuff. And didn't they do one other movie? Maybe they did a He-Man.
They did several movies. I think the first movie they did was Treasure Island.
Okay.
68, and then they did an Oliver Twist movie. But that Oz picture had a long and tortured history before it was actually completed.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've read about that in Andy Mangel's book about Filmation.
Yeah.
And I never knew that. I always thought that Journey Back to Oz was made like in the early 70s. And the reason they cast Liza Minnelli was because Judy Garland had passed away, and it was just a tribute to her mom, and it was totally untrue. I just made it up. I didn't know.
Yeah. I remember, they're making says on the titles, Danny Thomas as the Scarecrow, and I'm listening to it and think Danny Thomas sounds an awful lot like Larry Storch. And well, it turns out I guess they had some singing that Thomas recorded, and something happened to the voice track he recorded, and they re-recorded it with Larry Storch instead of getting Danny Thomas to re-record it. That's what I heard.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that, but yeah, that sounds funny. Certainly.
Yeah.
Or maybe
And they sounded like this. Oh, Dorothy. Oh.
Or maybe Danny Thomas said, "You want me to re-record it? Money," you know. It's like, you know. So okay, they said we'll get the second-rate actor. We'll get Larry Storch. Now, did you work? Didn't they do a Filmation Ghostbusters show around that same time as you're working on that as well? Did you work on that?
Yeah, they did. They started that show. I think that 3 separate shows were started while the movie was in production. One of them was She-Ra.
Oh yeah.
And then that Ghostbusters show, and then Brave Star.
Oh yeah, forgot about that. Yeah.
And they did a cheapo movie, and the movie was, this was, a long time ago. My recollection of it was that movie for Brave Star was about $3 million, and they did it in about approximately 3 months. And the Pinocchio picture was about 12 months and $12 million. So there was a big difference in the budget of them.
Much bigger budget, yeah.
But I went back to work for them just before they shut down, when they were working on the Bugsburg show.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something unique in that there was no stock in that show. All the animation was new animation.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were allowed to use more drawings in them too. They'd use that stock system was never really supposed to save work for the animators so much as it was supposed to save time in the ink and paint department.
Okay.
Because ink and paint is always the biggest cash outlay in a production. So by reusing cells, they saved a lot of money. I mean, the animators would have to sit down and re-expose the drawings for the scenes or add any new props that were in them.
Right.
And that's also why there were so many, things broken down into small pieces like heads and arms and mouths, because they take less time to paint. But but I think they were feeling the pinch of competition by the Bugsburg show, and we had footage. We had to do a certain amount of footage every week, but they didn't care if it was fuller animation, as long as we get the footage done.
Sounds like how it was when I interviewed Roman Arambula years ago about working for Gamma.
Yes.
Yeah. Similarly, they paid for footage. They didn't pay for. So if they did like the brief recap on the Underdog episode where they go, in our last episode, they got paid for it again, even though half of it was repeat footage from the last time. So they're all, hey, so that was the ones everybody wanted to work on, were the ones that had the repeat footage at the beginning of the episode. So, I don't know if that was a similar thing with the Pinocchio thing, but
no, it was. I mean, it was. We were on. No, that was on salary. You came and worked 8 hours, and there was so much work they expected you to do in a week, and it was a realistic amount of work to be done.
Right.
Today.
Now, did you work on any other projects at Filmation? Because I know it closed pretty soon after that, right?
No, it closed while we were working on Bugsburg.
Oh, okay.
What happened? I mean, it's probably in that. I haven't read that book, but I'm sure that story is in there about how the market for syndicated daily shows was getting soft because it was oversaturated.
Right.
So the ad revenue was starting to dip. So Westinghouse, who never bought Filmation on purpose in the first place, they bought Teleprompter to get the cable system. And I go, guys, did you know we bought a cartoon studio? Like, no, you're kidding me. No, look here.
So they didn't even know they were buying. Well, then how does L'Oreal fit into the picture? I mean, or
they
is that
wanted
who bought it afterwards?
No, they were from Europe, and My understanding at the time was they thought that the films hadn't been seen as much in Europe and they wanted to buy the library out.
Mhm.
They were not interested in production.
Hmm.
And I remember that there was some buzzing around the studio that this was going on. And I recall Scheimer trying to prevent that from happening. Because I think he knew that they were going to shut the studio down if they bought it, which they didn't waste any time either. They shut it down, on a Friday right after the sale was made.
Oh, geez.
And I think the weeks leading up to that, Lou looked like he hadn't been sleeping much. I think he was trying to prevent that deal from happening, possibly.
Now, was Filmation a publicly traded company? I mean, what was the deal there? I mean, didn't he have any sort of say so on all that? It's like, wasn't his company, or it was not?
No, I don't know. I mean, I thought they had sold out the teleprompter in the 60s.
Okay. Maybe I'm missing that part of the story. So, okay. So they were kind of like, I guess,
like Hanna-Barbera with Taft.
Yeah, that's what I was going to think of, animation. Yeah. Or I was thinking like William Gaines with Mad. He was just kind of a figurehead, but Warner's owned it. It's like, like that. So, okay. All right. Because you don't think about it that way, because all you ever see on those old Filmation shows is the circle with Scheimer and Prescott, and then Hal Sutherland's wonderful signature.
Yeah, he had that signature on his parking space, as I remember. I think right after the teleprompter sale, at the end of some of the shows, it said a teleprompter company.
It probably did. I just never paid that close attention to it.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't used to pay close attention to with Hanna-Barbera with Taft. I just thought Hanna-Barbera owned their own company all through like the 80s, and then I found out, oh, they sold it in the 60s. I had no idea. Why would they do that?
I'll tell you why they did it. I mean, I don't know this, but this is what I think they were thinking. They worked at MGM, which must have seemed like a stable situation. They were there for 20 years.
Right.
Shut down. And they were, they were trying to figure out what to do while MGM was shutting down. But they must have figured if MGM could shut down, any place could shut down. So I'm guessing, this is only speculation, that they figured we'd make enough on the sale of the company that if the whole thing tanks, we still have enough money to live on. So at the time, that might have seemed like a smart thing to do.
Yeah. I'm just surprised they did it so early. It seems like, they're only like barely 10 years into it. It seems like they could have waited another 10 years or so, but maybe they were getting nervous or something. I don't know.
And they weren't even the stockholders at the time, because Columbia Pictures had a stake in the company too. Which I think they had to buy back before they could make the sale.
Now, I know Columbia kind of ran itself, completely different than MGM, kind of like with little or no budget. If I go by my history of Three Stooges and stuff like that, they did everything on the cheap. So compared to MGM, so maybe they saw the writing on the wall, which is kind of odd, but and interesting that they did it like 2 years before they created what's arguably their greatest accomplishment, which I'm not a fan of, is Scooby-Doo.
Well, that was certainly the biggest cash cow ever.
Yeah. I'm wondering if they regret. Did you ever talk to Bill Hanna or Joe Barbera about that? Like, did they ever regret selling the company?
I've only spoken to them a few times, and I wasn't going to talk about anything like that or about Scooby-Doo. Yeah.
I just thought it might have come up or something, not. Yeah. Okay. Now, in the case of Filmation, and was there anything that Lou Scheimer or the other guys could do, or they really just were like, we're stuck and we gotta?
No, I'm. Don't quote me on this, but it's a dim recollection, but I think Scheimer was trying to see if he could round up the capital to buy the place before L'Oreal did. Yeah,
that sounds reasonable.
Yeah, he really was worried about the staff being thrown on the street. which is unusual for a boss.
Right.
He really didn't want to see everybody getting kicked out of the place. So he was trying to do something about it. And even after they bought it, he tried to buy the show from them so he could finish it.
Right.
Because a lot of work, you couldn't imagine how much work had already been done on it.
Right. And was it finished or is it just stopped? It just stopped.
It just stopped. Yeah.
Wow. So,
but there was a lot of work.
Crazy. That's crazy. I mean, you'd think they'd do it like, say, like Warner Brothers, where they're working on the incredible Mr. Limpet, and they say, well, we're closing down, but let's finish this project at least, and, something.
Yeah.
Like that. But
no, they weren't sentimental at L'Oreal. Not at all.
Now, have you ever heard anything since, like there's regrets or anything, or that was a stupid move on their part, or, I mean, not by others, but by them? Was there any regret or no?
Regrets on whose part?
But on L'Oreal's part, probably not. But
they probably don't have regrets about anything. I don't know.
So in the last day, I've heard this before, and this is in the book. It's like, didn't they just like gather everyone and anyone that worked there like in one big room and just announce it? I thought
that's not exactly what happened. There was
okay.
one big room. This was a office building in Canoga Park.
Mm-hmm.
The last building they were in was a 3-4 story office building in Canoga Park.
Mm-hmm.
And there wasn't an auditorium in it. There was a fairly large conference room.
Mm-hmm.
And Scheimer called people in groups to tell them what happened.
Okay.
So I admired him for telling everybody in person what happened.
Yeah.
Rather than just having somebody say, get out of here on the PA system. He kept, everybody was called in bunches, and he just sat everybody in the conference room, and he explained what had just happened.
Wow. And was that really your last day? I mean, there? And
it was everybody's last day.
Okay. So, there was no like 2 weeks notice or anything like that. It was just
no, there was no notice. I mean, they paid severance, but one friend of mine who was an animator there was on a skiing trip that day. And I left a message on his phone machine and said, Bob, don't come to the studio. It's been closed down. And he thought, well, that's one of Mike's pranks again, right?
Oh. Well, I guess he'd find out when the doors are locked or whatever.
Yeah, he did.
Okay. So he did show up.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Should have been there and said, I wasn't fooling, hey. But, So what did you do immediately after? I mean, I know that you did go on to work for Bakshi and the Mighty Mouse show, but was there...
Yeah, I know. Well, in between stints at Filmation, I worked with Bakshi.
Okay.
And I worked for the Clampets for a little bit. And I worked with Bakshi again after that too. And by that time, I was also working on I think by the time I was at Filmation, I was doing work for Rick Reinert.
Oh, okay.
I think I may have started doing work for Marvel. And I believe I was also starting to do work for Playhouse Pictures on their commercials. So that was a busy period, actually. So there was other things to do, but it was just kind of a shock seeing the place close up so suddenly.
Well, yeah, that would be a shock too.
Even knowing that could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were that busy, how did you run your day? I mean, did you work out of your house, or did you go to each studio for little bits of time during the week?
It depended on the project. I mean, some of the work was freelance. Some of it was go into work. Mm-hmm. The Bakshi stuff was always I went into work. The Filmation was going into work. Mm-hmm. And I think somewhere around there I was working at Warner Brothers, and that was going into work.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever conflicts? There must have been.
There was not a lot of sleeping back then.
But I mean, if you were scheduled for a day at, say, Warner Brothers, and then Ralph wanted you what did you have to tell them? Say, I'm at Warner
No,
Brothers today. Sorry.
no, I couldn't be on staff at two places at once.
Oh, okay.
I could be on staff one place and freelance at another place.
Okay.
But and I mean, I used to write on a calendar what was supposed to be due when.
Wow.
So the calendar was all filled with marks and things, and what day I had scheduled to work on this, that, or the other thing. That was a busy time period.
Incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you probably don't want to repeat that now. I'm sure it's like maybe monetarily, but I mean,
I'd like to have a little bit of it.
Yeah, but I mean, the hectic pace. I mean, how did you keep up? Did you lose sleep and all that?
Yeah, no, it was get up, throw some clothes on, and go to work. It was, I worked till bedtime, and
wow, it's amazing. Yeah. Now, I could talk about other studios we worked at, but I'm was a little more curious because we were talking about Facebook. Jerry Beck and I started this website, which may eventually lead to a book. Just talking about obscure animation companies and stuff like that. People, the companies that did like characters like Roger Ramjet or like the Hal Seegers and all that, all those different types of companies and everything, and then companies that did commercials and bits for Sesame Street and Electric Company and all that stuff. And my question after all that is, you seem to have this big working knowledge of like all that stuff. And even me being an animation historian to this day, some things like totally baffle me as to who did them and when and why. And you always seem to have an answer or a good educated guess. So where did you get your knowledge and experience on all that stuff?
I mean, mostly it was being fanatical.
Okay.
No, I mean, sometimes it would, sometimes I'd end up working or befriending somebody who worked at or even ran one of those studios. And in the case of Playhouse, I worked with them for 15 years. Mm-hmm. And when I started there, Abe Woolery, the founder, was still there, and he was very happy to talk about, the history of the company, and that there was still artwork from their old commercials around that I could dig through, and
okay,
and people I could talk to about it. So. Mm-hmm. That finding, work at Playhouse was a great experience. First, I enjoyed the work there, and the Wooleries, but I found out all of my heroes had passed through that company, and there was piles of their drawings in the storage room.
Mm-hmm. So. I know Roger Ramjet was done through Playhouse, but what were some others?
No, it wasn't.
I thought it was.
That was
Pantomime. I'm sorry. Sorry.
That was Fred Crippen's company.
Okay, I was confusing Pantomime with Playhouse. So what did Playhouse do then? Let's.
They for most of their existence, they did commercials.
Okay.
They sometimes did TV and movie titles. They did sometimes sales films and educational shorts, but their main business was commercials.
And any particular characters?
Oh yeah, they did. For any of you Stan Freberg fans, they used to do the Clark Smathers, the Kaiser aluminum foil salesman.
Oh, okay, all right.
They did this long series of commercials for Falstaff beer with Eddie Mayhoff as the old pro. Mm-hmm. Those are darn funny. And they did the Peanuts animation starting in 1959 for Ford Falcon.
Okay. That I didn't know. I always thought it was still connected to Melendez, but that only was for the specials.
That's a story for somebody else to write, but it's a story Melendez was working at Playhouse.
Okay.
And he kind of left under somewhat dubious circumstances and used a lot of the Playhouse staff to make a Charlie Brown Christmas.
Hmm. Because it does have a similar look. Granted, it's still Charlie Brown, but you
Yeah.
know,
They're
you know.
mainly, I mean, they're mostly the same people, because Bill worked on those Ford commercials with Peanuts, and particularly Bill Littlejohn, Herman Cohen,
Mhm.
Alan Zaslav, they all worked on the Peanut stuff before that. So, you had a staff of people already. Ruth Kassane was another one. I mean, they were all from Playhouse.
Mhm. Now, how long did they go as a company?
Playhouse,
Yeah.
they were just shy of 50 years, because they opened late in 52, and they think it was 2002 that they shut down.
Wow, they went that late. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was
But
the last director there.
so how long were you there?
It was about the last 15 years they were in
Oh,
a.
okay. All right. So you did get a chance to learn all that stuff. So
Yeah.
okay. Since I mentioned Fred Crippen and am confusing it with the other ones, did you work for that company or any of those other
No,
companies?
I love Fred's work. I loved Fred. He was a great guy. And I always wanted to work for him. But the stuff he did was so simple, he really didn't need that many people. It was like one of the many things they did at Pantomime Pictures was Dirk Niblick of the Math Brigade for Square One TV, which was on PBS.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
It had Gary Owens and Jim Thurman and Gene Moss, the whole gang in it, and Bob Arbogast and Joni Gerber. And they're really funny, but they were genuine math lessons in them.
Hmm.
I saw it on the tube, and I rushed over to see Fred. I was like, Fred, you got to let me work on these. And Fred was like, yeah, but geez, it only takes a couple of guys and I got them already.
Oh. Well, at least he's honest, I suppose.
Yeah.
Were there any other studios still around? Well, I don't. Here's my ignorance about a lot of this stuff. I don't know necessarily what was in New York versus what was in LA. Obviously, Jay Ward was in LA.
Yeah.
TV Spots was in LA, but I don't know all of them. TTV was in New York, but like Hal Seeger, where that was New York.
That was New York. Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. And then the ones that did and Linus the Lionhearted.
Well, that was the production was done in L.A. Ed Graham, the advertising man who started that whole project, his office was based in New York.
Okay.
They ended up using actors from both coasts.
Okay.
But all the animation was done on the West Coast. But even some of the character models were done in New York by George Canada Jr., but some of them were done in LA by Bob Kurtz, who was at the LA office. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, did the same animators work on like all the TV commercials for posts since they were the same characters, or was it totally separate?
Some of the post commercials were done there. Some of them were done at other studios.
Okay, that's what I kind of thought, because they didn't always look the same, and I always wondered about that.
Yeah, I mean, in a few cases they were. Like Gerard Baldwin worked on the TV show, and he worked on like some of those commercials before that with the Jackie Leonard version of the Postman.
Right.
Hi, I'm your friendly neighborhood postman. I'm talking about post alphabets. Yeah.
And then I mentioned Roman. He worked for the company, and I forgot the company name, but they made this little character called Jot. I mean,
that company was in Dallas, Texas. It was.
That's right. I think he did mention.
It was Kites Herndon. Yeah, he worked at Kites Herndon.
Okay.
And one of the things they specialized in at Kites Herndon was those drive-in commercials. They did a lot for Dr. Pepper.
Oh, is it like with the dancing drinks and food and stuff like that?
No, they were pretty hip. They had some really sharp graphics and some astonishing effects animation that would have taken multiple camera passes and careful planning.
Mhm.
I mean, even, that they did most of the Jot cartoons. There were some that were done at 2 other studios.
Hmm.
That I didn't think looked as good, but even some of the effects at Jot were done in multiple camera passes. Like when he turns into a dot and he's bouncing around, that was done. They didn't animate a dot bouncing around. They did that with the camera.
Oh,
On separate passes.
kind of like the bouncing ball and the old bouncing ball singing cartoons.
No, that was still a different process, but that was done in 2 passes. I mean, both of them involved, burning something white over something with other values,
right?
That were shot separately.
Mm-hmm.
But the Fleischer bouncing balls were shot in real time, and at least the scenes where they had the actual bouncing ball, and they had, they pulled up on a drum the words.
Words, yeah.
There was a black mask around them, but if let's say they had a drawing of a dot and they moved the camera. Or or move the compound the dot was on and filmed the dot moving against just solid black, and they could burn that over the background. Looks like the dot's moving.
Interesting.
It was a clever effect because they timed it well, so it looked like animation.
Right. And of course, when I was younger, I thought it was, and then I found out it wasn't, and I was like, wow, that was a really good optical effect.
No, they were that studio was really amazing with optical effects. And it was all film back then. There was,
Now, did you work at? I mean, you said you wanted to work with Fred Crippen, but are there any other studios you worked for, even for a short time, like Format or anything like that?
No, I knew Herb Klin. I was friends with Herb Klin. So, and he was happy to talk about the studio and everybody who worked at the studio. But they weren't actually producing anything by then.
And when was this? Early 80s?
This was late 80s, early 90s. Yeah.
Now, the only thing I could think of is that they might have been doing an occasional hee-haw animation by that point, or probably not even that.
By that time, I think they were just recycling animation.
Yeah, so who knows? Yeah. So did a lot of these animation studios just kind of keep their doors open even if they weren't really producing anything, or how did that work?
It really depended on where they were getting. The trouble with the commercial business is it's all work for hire.
Right.
And so if they're not getting work in, they have no income. At a place like Hanna-Barbera, they had other money coming in from licensing and from reruns, because they had they got a piece of the reruns and they got a piece of the licensing. So the money they got to produce the shows wasn't the only income for the studio. But at a commercial house, the money you get from the jobs is the only money you have coming in. If they go for too long without work, that can seriously harm the studio.
Now, did you ever try working for Jay Ward, or were they gone by the time? When did you get into the industry? I guess I should ask that.
I got into the industry in the early 80s, but I didn't get to LA till 85.
Oh, okay. So they were pretty much done at that point.
Ward was winding down by then.
Yeah. And there's one that just came into my head a second ago, and then it zipped back out again. I was saying, did you ever try working there? And it's like, I'll have to come across it again. But let's see, mid 80s. Well, you did say you worked for Marvel. What did you do for Marvel when you worked there?
No, I'm for the comic book division.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I thought you meant Marvel Productions, the animation.
I did one job for them on this long forgotten show, on one episode of this show called The Little Wizards. That was the only time I ever did anything for them. There were other times where I either went there looking for work, or somebody may have even called me, but I recall going to see Alex Lovey, who I wanted to talk to anyways. But he was pretty, at Marvel in the mid '80s, they were doing nothing but Hasbro.
Right, G.I. Joe and all that. Yeah.
And Alex was going to be producing Potato Head Kids.
Huh.
And I went to see Alex. I actually just sat and chatted with him about cartoons for a while.
Just like we're doing. But I don't have a job for you, but maybe he didn't either.
And he wanted me to do storyboards on it, but I think he was in the hospital by the time they were getting scripts in, and they had another producer who didn't know who I was. So, I missed out on the Potato Head Kids.
Oh, well. So I guess you mentioned Marvel, so that means Ren and Stimpy, right? For the Ren and Stimpy.
I worked on Mighty Mouse before that, and Ren and Stimpy. One experimental book they did called Epic Light, which unfortunately they did one issue of and didn't do a second one. Mm-hmm. They wanted to see if this one sells before we make more, but which is ludicrous because for a normal comic book, you have 4 of them completed before you have any idea how well the first one did.
Right.
The 4th issue comes out by the time you find out what the first issue sold. So they said, well, we're going to put this out and see how it sells. But if it did sell, it would take them 6 months to get a follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember if it did or didn't sell well, but I just know they never made a second one. It was kind of them trying to do something like an alternative comic.
Mm-hmm.
So to that end, they had a lot of people from alternative comics in it, each doing a story, but it was in color.
Mm-hmm. And let's see, one studio, like all the Kellogg's animation, Tony the Tiger and everything. I think it was Burnett or something like that.
That was the ad agency, Leo Burnett.
And where did they do their animation over the years, or did it switch studios?
Different studios.
Okay.
Yeah, you mentioned Tony the Tiger. For a long time, those were done at Quartet.
Mm-hmm.
Some of their other clients, there used to be a studio in LA called Film Fair. They used to do.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
For Leo Burnett too, like Charlie the Tuna.
Mm-hmm.
And Film Fair tanked about 1990.
Okay.
On that, but it was about then.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned Charlie the Tuna. I mean, I thought DePatie-Freleng was doing it, or did they take it over once it was Marvel?
No, they may have by then, but
okay.
I think Film Fair may have been doing them sooner than that because they were doing other work for Leo Burnett, like Keebler.
Yeah. Okay.
And Green Giant,
Mm-hmm.
Those Green Giants, when they had the Sprout, that was Murakami Wolf.
That was a studio I was going to ask you about too. I mean, did you ever try working for them? Because they did a lot of different TV specials and other random things over the years. So
they were a pretty hip studio for a long time, but then they got into doing those daily syndicated shows that were all jobbed out overseas, like most of the other shows.
Yeah.
And but while they were doing commercials and TV specials, they were doing some pretty hip things. They actually have a cell on the other wall from some of the animation they did for 200 Motels.
Oh yeah. I don't know if I told you this, but because we haven't talked for a while. I think the last time I saw you was when I was down there with Jerry, like 2019, 2018 or something, when I went down there to visit. But
and
that was at the restaurant, or I think we picked you up at your house. That's right. But I'm working on a book about the Turtles and Flo and Eddie and everything. Of course, they're in 200 Motels.
Oh yeah, and I love the Turtles.
They also worked on a Dirty Duck film, which Howard Kalin's trying to get reissued on like Blu-ray or something like that, because they somehow still own the rights to it, even though it's a Murakami Wolf thing.
Yeah, it's like
Murakami or whatever. I said that wrong.
Chuck Svensson did practically all the animation himself on that movie.
Mm-hmm. Was the Dirty Duck movie?
On Dirty Duck, which was actually going to be called Cheap.
Yeah. And I know Flo and Eddie recorded a song called Cheap, which
that was a theme song.
Yeah.
And the one time Jerry Beck wanted to run Dirty Duck at the Silent Movie Theater, he got Chuck Svensson to come talk about it,
mm-hmm.
which is great. But what made it even more thrilling for me was the print that he brought was an earlier print that actually had the title Cheap as the title.
Oh, wow.
Before they changed the name of it. So I was probably the only person in the audience who saw the word cheap blazed in this big screen going, oh my God, it's cheap.
And nobody else got it.
Yeah.
Did Jerry know about it?
No, most of the people who were there were very
excuse me.
And they're very young. They probably didn't know, what it was about necessarily, other than it was, an early sort of an underground movie. And I remember the audience responding really well to it. I was almost surprised by that,
Yeah. Well, the people there at Miyazaki Wolf must have really loved Flo and Eddie, because, I mean, not only did they use them for 200 Motels, and the Dirty Duck, but they did a series of Strawberry Shortcake records and TV specials and Care Bears and a few others that they wrote songs for and did voiceovers for and all sorts of things.
Well, I mean, you'd probably better off asking Mark and Howard about this, but I'm assuming that they met while making 200 Motels, because Flo and Eddie were in the Mothers at the time.
Yeah. And I'm still working on it, but I think if memory serves, they kind of met because they were also working on The Point with Harry Nielsen. They're friends with Harry Nielsen. So, it was all big LA connection going on in the early 70s around there.
Oh, yeah.
So, always had the Hollywood vampires with Mickey Dolenz and Ringo Starr and John Lennon and all those others, Keith Moon, So, anyway, yeah, so that was a studio I was thinking, did you ever work for? Trying to think if there's other ones. So after, we've talked about Mighty Mouse before, but was that ever destined to go beyond the 1 or 2 seasons, or is just kind of
no? That's when we started the second season, we knew that was it.
Oh, okay.
And I thought that was an incredible blunder on CBS's part, telling us that.
Mm-hmm.
They picked up some extra shows for the second season. They said, after this, you're not getting any more. And we're like, well, if they're going to cancel us anyways, then we can do whatever we want.
Yeah. So, did you have more censorship problems then, if that's the case, or no?
Oh, I mean, of all the TV shows I worked on, that had the least censorship. I know there's some stories that there was no censorship, which is not really true, but we had the least.
Interesting. Okay.
And that was all because of Ralph.
Okay.
Ralph would actually tell him to go to hell if he thought requests were too stupid. So we get way less notes than on some of the other shows I worked on. Way less.
I mean, I know it's notorious now for the sniffing flower sequence, which they thought was Mighty Mouse.
That was John's idea. Someday in private, I'll tell you how that all happened.
Okay. But I mean, was that ever censored by the network in advance, or is it only because of that?
No, it actually aired like that.
Yeah, that's what I thought, because I remembered it airing, and then the outcry came out. So, but was it?
I mean,
was it the network coming after it at that point? Or?
It'll take me more than an hour to tell that story.
Okay, we'll go into that story, but short answer, was it? Did the network care, or is it all just this outside thing?
Well, here's the thing: the CBS's initial response, and I have Xeroxes of all this stuff.
Yeah.
CBS's initial response was, we'd be happy to run the cartoon for you, as you obviously haven't seen it before.
Interesting.
So at first they were like, they were kind of brushing the guy off, but ultimately I think they cut it out on some of the repeats.
Yeah, they did, because I remember that, because I used to watch that show voraciously, no matter if it was a new one or a repeat, because I thought it was a funny show. And of course, back in those days, no home video of it, I mean, it took years for that to come out. I think it was the DVD set was the first home video release.
Yeah, that was what, 2004 maybe?
Yeah, which I was totally shocked that actually would come out, because I mean, there's no other Mighty Mouse release. So I thought, this is kind of out of left field.
Yeah, you want to know, they did a good job on that, because that was a kind of a transitional period where some studios were using computer paint, which was very primitive then. Which would have meant that the finished films were on NTSC 1-inch tape. Our shows were kind of a hybrid. All the animation was shot on 35 millimeter film, and the preliminary editing, the picture track was edited on film, and the basic sound cut on film also, but ultimately, the music was dubbed in while it was on tape. So the show was, what went out to the network was a 1-inch tape, but there was 35 millimeter film of the picture track.
Do you think that helped it come out on home video? Because
it did, because they were able to retransfer, and they did. They transferred the film, they cut it. They cut the film. If it didn't match up with what was on the tape, they edited it to match the picture. Picture track was a new transfer on that video.
Interesting. Okay. Because I mean, like when I talked to Jerry Beck about like a lot of the mainly Hanna-Barbera series that come out on home video, I said, why is this series out that nobody cares about? Say, I'll just randomly say like Roman Holidays. And why isn't something else out, that everybody wants, like second, third season of Huckleberry Hound? Now, I know it's music rights and other stuff going on, but Jerry has always said that, a lot of this stuff is just sitting around and is able to be put out pretty easily without much effort, and so it sounds like a similar thing with the Mighty Mouse thing, that, it was in a format that you could easily put it onto a disc and shoo, done.
Well, they actually did some work. They didn't just dump like they did with those stupid I was so mad at the J Ward DVDs, because they just used that syndicated package where they didn't get music clearance and stuff. There was a lot of tampering and wrong soundtracks on that set.
I'm always wondering about that, and maybe maybe you don't, but was a lot of it actually music right clearances, or was it just mainly ignorance and, just, putting it out without checking what the correct music track was, or, this was easier, let's just put this out?
This is something to ask Keith Scott about, but I thought it was because the first season, a lot of the stuff that was composed by Frank Comstock, which was the first Mr. Peabody theme, the Rocky Show opening, the Fractured Fairy Tale opening, and a lot of the incidental cues, they didn't own free and clear.
Okay.
Later, when they had, I think Dennis Farnan and Fred Steiner doing, I think they owned that music.
Okay.
So they eliminated, even if it was a few notes of the horns going da 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 da, which they'd sometimes add a few notes of, they'd clip those notes out of the track.
Wow.
Crazy.
Yeah. And people ask me all the time, like I'm some expert, but they go, well, if they ever put this stuff out on Blu-ray, will they ever fix it? I go, probably not. It'll probably be the same thing, just on Blu-ray.
No. So, if you've got any films or tapes from the Sunday show where they at least had the right soundtracks, hang on to them.
Yeah. I have, even with the total television stuff, I have, my nice collection of bootleg stuff because it just doesn't look the same. They never do it exactly correct, and it's like it seems like you could do it, but I get it, because sometimes if it's not music rights, certain elements are missing. I mean, I don't know if you know my story about when I was putting together the Underdog and Tennessee Tuxedo DVD sets a few years ago. They actually had all the cartoons in pristine shape. This is Hallmark had them, and then it got to sent over to Classic Media, and but they didn't have any of the audio tracks at all. So all the audio you hear on the DVD are from my bootlegs. I had to send it to them, and they married them back together and synced them up so it would work, and that's what you got. So but at least it's the original soundtrack. But it's like generation from the original, of course.
Yeah.
So it's crazy, because I thought, didn't you guys keep all this stuff? I mean, it aired for 30 years on TV. So I don't know. But let's see, what other questions can I ask? So after Mighty Mouse, you did the first season of The Simpsons, or did you have something in between that? Or were you just working a lot of different...
I was jumping around a lot. I did work on the first season of The Simpsons, which ironically was in the Clampett building. We were on the second floor of the Clampett building, and Kent Butterworth, Rich Moore, J.C. Wegman, and myself had the office over the front door with that little balcony. There were pigeons were congregating on all day. But that was a space I wanted to make Beanie in. Like I guess that was a year before. Trying to talk him into making, the second floor had been vacated, so there's no tenant in it. I'm like, let's make Beanie up there,
So that's mainly what you worked on, is the new episodes of Beanie and Cecil?
I worked on it up to the point where they, I was working on development and pitch stuff directly with Sodi. And when the network kept trying to steer them into a network approved studio, basically meant one of the ABC execs had an interest in Deke, and wanted to steer the show to Deke, and there was no way I wanted to
work for Deke,
make it at Deke and be the man that ruined Beanie. So I apologized. I didn't take the producer job. I went back to Ralph's, and we did more Mighty Mouse. That was between seasons of Mighty Mouse. And during that time, Tom Minton was there. Tom was going to be the head writer of the show, and he didn't like the way things were shaping up with ABC either. And he went back to Ralph's first, And I was like, oh, great, we don't have Tom now.
Now, I know he's a sensitive topic nowadays, but I'm going to talk about him briefly anyway. John Kricfalusi, it's like, did he work? He worked on both of those, the Mighty Mouse thing and the Beanie and Cecil thing.
He worked on the first season of Mighty Mouse, but not the second season.
Oh, I didn't know that. I guess I
the second season he was at Deke doing the Beanie show.
Okay, so he did go over to Deke. I mean, it's very confusing. So how did that Beanie and Cecil thing work? I mean, it was originally going to be a Clampett production, like the original, and then they were moving it over to Deke. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, Deke. Well, the network said you got to use a network approved studio.
Okay, I get it now. Okay.
No, I was trying to talk everybody into producing it themselves. We'd done Mighty Mouse a year before, and I tried to describe what Ralph did to set the show up, and what the schedule was like and how many people were involved. And no, it ended up going to Deke, and I said, well, if you go to Deke, you're going to be stuck with their writers. They're going to eat most of the budget up. And if you want to do layouts, you're going to have to bring your own tables.
Wow.
DePatie didn't have any, they had no animation paper, they had no animation desks.
Hmm.
So they had to build a bunch of, they bought a bunch of these knockdown desks and built them up and bought some discs. But they'd never seen those things at Deke before because they never did any production work there.
Wow. Hmm. So yeah, the funny thing as a fan, it's like I think I only saw one, maybe two of the final aired episodes. I mean, did all of them even get made or even make it to air? What happened to that series?
It was behind schedule.
Yeah.
And there's any number of reasons which I won't go into why that might have been, but it was not on schedule. No.
Yeah.
And that's a little sensitive too. I don't want to go into too much.
Right. But do we know how many episodes actually were finished and how many actually made it to air? Because like I said,
I think it aired for 4 weeks, and I think that 4th week they may have had to run one of the old cartoons in the fill airtime.
Wow.
I think.
Sounds similar to Ren Stimpy, and I know that story later,
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it's the same reason, but anyway, we won't go into that. I agree with you. Everybody's like, please, please, please. And it's like, I want to talk about other things. My show. Anyway. So let's see. After Simpsons, I know that story, and you've talked about working in the first season there. I suppose you can repeat some of it if you want, but my curiosity is, what did you do after that? Or were you just continuing to work,
I had other interests already. I mean, I was already doing a lot of commercials by then and doing comic book work.
Yeah.
So, and I think I was still working for Rick Reiner on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And that was another long running studio. And Rick, just a brief word about Rick. He was one of the nicest producers in the business. They were really a nice outfit to work for.
And what did they produce? What type of things?
They did a lot of commercials, a large number of public service commercials. They also did, a lot of after school specials for ABC.
Okay.
They did some contract work for Disney, like that Orange Bird film, I think a day for Eeyore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And Rick himself was really good at painting in watercolors, and he often painted the backgrounds in his own films. And they were, probably the last studio that was using watercolors, but they were really lovely watercolors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, for Disney, they did, like, it seemed like they did other educational films, right? That had
I think they did. Yeah.
Okay. Because I remember seeing a few of those that had like the regular characters, but it's like, this never aired on television or whatever. Okay. So I guess I could just ask you, what are you doing currently? I mean, do you still work in the industry? What do you do now? It's like,
I don't do a lot now. One of the last places I was working regularly for was Bongo Comics on the Simpson comics.
Oh, that's right, you were. Yeah. And then of course,
I did that for 15 years, and they just stopped without telling anybody.
Really? Okay.
I was a little miffed that they didn't bother to tell anybody they were ceasing operations.
Well, it kind of seemed like the writing was on the wall when Disney bought 20th Century Fox, but I didn't know if that was the reason.
No, that wouldn't have had anything to do with it, because Matt had the comic book rights.
That's true, he did. Yeah.
He had the comic book rights, so they had to acknowledge that the characters were trademarks of Fox, which they did in the indicia.
Mm-hmm.
But they really didn't have any control over the comic books.
Okay, so it had nothing to do with the Disney sale that he decided to pull the plug at that point then?
No, it was just, I heard this, secondhand, but I think his attorney convinced him that they had enough inventory that they didn't need to make any more new comics.
Yeah. Of course, where do they print them now? I mean, they're not even putting out trade
iTunes.
paperbacks or anything anymore.
No, they still do paperbacks, but they also have them on iTunes. Yeah.
Okay, so it's all digital now.
They have digital sales. Yeah.
Okay, and I'm sure you don't get any royalties from that, right?
No, they never paid for reprints, and they never returned artwork. Yeah.
Oh, that sucks. Sounds like the old days.
They paid better than most companies, but they didn't give you the artwork back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds like Mad Magazine or something.
Yeah. The other company, I worked for Marvel and DC and Archie, and they always sent the artwork back.
So at this point, would you consider new offers and everything like that? I mean, I'm sure you do commissions and stuff like that, but I mean, it's like you still in the market for new production and things.
Yes.
What's he doing? What does it say? I can't hire me. I can't even see it.
I'm cheap.
I'm cheap. Hire me, I'm cheap. Well, I did hire this man twice. I hired him for 2 book covers. I need to write a few more books. Actually, I have a Disney book coming up that I need a cover for. Maybe I'll consult with you again, because I've used Scott Shaw twice. I've used Jim Engel twice. I used John Severin twice, but that was kind of unintentional. But and so maybe time to seek out your services. But anyway, I don't know, if I have anything else to add or ask at this point. I always like talking to you and everything like that, but I guess, do you ever do any shows anymore? I know you don't like going to San Diego anymore.
Well, I mean, a lot of the shows are interrupted by the virus situations.
Of course, but things are starting
time. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll probably end up going back at some point to some of the shows, but the last couple of years, no. Yeah.
Right. Well, it seems like you survived, so at least that happened. So
I'm still here. I'm still here, you guys.
The infamous Mike Kazaleh is right there. Anyway, all right. And any more issues of Zorch? I know it took 30 years to do 2 issues.
Yeah, it was 18 years.
18 years. That's right. It was a big long gap. And I think when I saw you put issue 2 out, and I was like shocked that you bothered with a second issue, and it's like
I'm shocked too, because by that time there was no, it's easier than ever to print the comic book, but it's harder than ever
to sell them. Yeah.
Sell them.
Yes. Isn't that the thing? Isn't that the truth?
It's like a plug for one of my good friends who passed on recently, Will Ryan. We did some comic books based on the duo that he and Nick Santa Maria were, Biffle and Schuster.
Oh yeah, I just interviewed him recently, Nick.
And we did 6 issues of a comic book, which hardly anybody saw. So mostly Will was selling them where he and Nick were performing.
Oh, okay.
So then we decided to collect them in a paperback and put them in print on demand.
Okay. I think I had heard about that, because I know they put all the shorts on a DVD. And
I mean, quick plug here. Not that I don't get anything for this, but I'm plugging it anyways.
All right.
Yeah, this is the paperback. So.
Look, Nick. I assume you're really close to Will Ryan, and since he passed away and everything like that. Did you work with him at various studios, or are you just a personal friend of his?
Well, no, he was a personal friend for a long time, and there were times we worked on the same projects, but not in the same department.
Oh, okay.
Because usually on the shows he would if we were on the same show, he was doing voices.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, the last time I saw him, and this is another podcast episode. Well, I had Amber Jones's movie, documentary about Bill Scott, which I don't know if you've had a chance to see. But she had, it's on YouTube. I can send you a link to it. It's very well done.
Please.
Yeah. And she interviewed the family, but she also interviewed like Keith Scott and did interview Will Ryan. And that was the last time I saw him. She had like an online Zoom just like that. There's like 30 little boxes of everybody watching it. And I was one of them. Keith Scott was there, Tara Strong was there, and Will Ryan was there, among others, in the Scott family and stuff like that. So, it was very well done. And, she's only 18 years old, and it's like she did an incredible job of a documentary. So yeah, I'll send you a link after we get off here. So you'll enjoy it, because did you know Bill Scott, or did you?
No, I knew a lot of other Ward alumni, but not Bill Scott.
Because you said you made it out here in '85. Maybe you saw him once before you.
Yeah, I did meet. I didn't know him that well, but I met Jay Ward a few times.
Mm-hmm.
Both times was at the Emporium that he had on Sunset.
Yeah, I'll tell you my story. I didn't really meet him, but it was at the Emporium, and it was back when his wife was still running the shop, and Tiffany would sometimes be out there too. But he never came out, but I knew he was there. Yeah. And I think I asked about him. I said, "Is Jay here?" And she goes, "Oh no, it's like he's busy, or he's not here, or something like that." And then and I was like 12 years old at the time. And it's like, then I go outside, and there's this guy with a big mustache in the window, and he waves to me. And I said, but I was too shy, I guess, at that age to go back and say, "You're there," but I waved to him. So I could say I waved to Jay Ward, hey, but it's like, I guess he was a very shy person from what I've been told. So,
Yeah, I guess it was a shy extrovert. Yes.
Yeah.
Or perhaps an exhibitionist introvert.
Yeah. Although, that is an appropriate way of me to see him, that I'm told he's not there, and then he waves to me out the window saying, "I'm still here." I think this is about 1981, so they were still in production then, still doing Captain Crunch,
That was like, who's that guy with the mustache? I don't know.
Well, I know it was him.
I heard him call his horse Silver.
No, I knew it was him because, his mustache is very distinctive, and it's like, it was him, I've seen photos of him, so anyway, so that's my brush with fame. I got to wave to Jay Ward anyway. So but I did meet Buck Biggers in LA. I don't know, did you go to that one convention that was in LA that Buck Biggers actually came out?
No, I wasn't
talk
there.
About Underdog. Geez, it's got to be about 10 years ago now, and I said, "Ooh, if he's coming to LA, I gotta go." And so I went down, we chatted for a bit. I got him to sign some pictures of Underdog and stuff, and comic books and stuff like that, and then flew home. But anyway, so that's my connection on Total Television. But anyway, all right, so we're at the end of the show. Here's your chance to plug yourself. How can people get in contact you, give you work?
I'm opening in Las Vegas at the Sands Hotel.
Take two.
Yes, Dean Martin will be opening for me. And,
but seriously, so how can people get in touch with you? They like commission some artwork, or just ask you a question? What's the best way?
Well, I have email, but carrier pigeon, message in a bottle.
Do you mind giving your email in the show?
Can on a string. Well, if I say it, it'll, it's not a word of English, so.
Well, we've already said it on the show. It's Zorch.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's Mkazorch, yes.
Yes. mkazorch@gmail.com. So
No, it has SBC Global.
Oh, sbcglobal.net. That's right. That's right. Because I just emailed it right before the show. And just as a quickie, it's like Zorch, you got that from Transfusion by Nervous Norvus, correct?
Well, yeah.
Okay, so that's what I thought. I think we discussed that before, but I was just kind of curious. So if you haven't heard Transfusion by Nervous Norvus, flip on over to YouTube. I'm sure
Yeah, it
it's
was
on
in
there.
Ape Call, actually.
Oh, it's Ape Call, yeah.
Yeah.
Real Zorch. That's I don't remember because I have a DVD that has like everything he ever recorded, which wasn't much.
And I think,
died young.
yeah. And it may have been coined earlier than that. I know he used to sometimes do work with a radio personality called Red Blanchard. I think also used to use the word. Yes.
Very cool. All right. Well, I want to thank you, Mike Kazaleh, for being my special guest today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And if I get down to LA again one of these times, I'll probably look you up, look up Jerry, or look up something else. I don't know. Anyway, I was going to say something a little vaguely dirty, but you can imply it. Anyway, and all right. And I thank you again. And we'll see you on another Fun Ideas podcast. See you next time.
Okay.